himself and dresses everything, which is very different than a lot of the killers we saw.
This was something I liked. I liked this person's work before, and I really wanted to bring it to life. It actually started to love that. I live in that. And Candyman is the only one. See, it's even hard not to say, y'all. I know you're listening out there. Cover the mirror. Try not to say it yourself. But the more you don't think about it, you're like, oh, can you read my thoughts? And you're like, wait, he's not real.
Yeah.
Wait, what if he is? What if I leave this thing and all of a sudden it's like, to the bed, I feel like not just as a Black villain, he is a villain. He is the thing that, we're grown adults and we're sitting here trying to count how many times we said it.
Yeah.
He's one of those things that always scares you. It's people talk about Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger doesn't hold a candle.
No, I don't think so.
No. Jason doesn't.
No.
It's there's no horror, there's no sarcasm, there's no minstrel show to him.
Mm-hmm.
It is an unrelenting, unforgiving killer.
Yeah. And not a brute either. That's what I really like about him. He's not a brute whatsoever. He's very eloquently spoken, very he's got this nice demeanor to him, as well as he's polite is what he's even talked to his victim. And just the way he holds himself and dresses everything, which is very different than a lot of the killers we saw in the classic horror films. They're either really brutish or they try to be a little too playful. If I'm thinking Pennywise. So he's this perfect
and
down the middle.
Freddy's real playful.
It's very true, and Freddy too. He's this perfect down the middle of a flawless perfection of every single thing he does. His voice, how he carries himself, his abilities within the movie are top notch as far as
he never stops. Yeah,
right. Spiritually gaslighting too. He's a very interesting character that way.
Yeah, but I mean, in reality, all he wanted to do was have you keep your name out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
That's all he ever asked for. He was just just keep my name out your mouth.
Yeah, it's true.
So I mean, it is a perfect hood character from what was it? Cabrini Green is where it was set. I'm trying to remember where it was set, but it was set in the hood in Chicago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was set in the hood in Chicago. Perfect villain for that. Hey, all I want you to do is keep your name out my mouth. I keep my name out your mouth. And I love how that really, when you boil it down, that's all he really wanted. It was just you running your mouth in these streets, I'm going to come find you. I'm going to get you. Keep your name out my mouth. Keep my name out your mouth. And that's the best thing ever. That was what? What's more perfect from a villain for a villain from the hood?
And what's really interesting about him too was the character Helen, the main character. I feel like she had maybe a billion chances not to go and look into the story further, right? She just did so many things of you were in so much danger, but kept on. It worked for the movie, but she kept on pushing things to find out more throughout the film. Where I'm like, you are in way too much danger to be doing that. When she wanted to go to the projects to kind of find out what was going on there, and then she went into the wall, when she opened up the mirror to go on the wall, and her friend kept on saying, hey, you shouldn't do this. We shouldn't get out the car. We shouldn't do this. And she didn't listen to any of that. And then I'm like, well, you were kind of warned throughout the whole film not to keep looking into this.
I mean, that in of itself is it has its own context to it, because she is very much a white woman in America in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not downplaying any of the listeners that happen to be white women in America, but in the last couple months, I'm in Minneapolis right now, so racial tension is everywhere here.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last couple years, we've been introduced to the idea of Karens and all these other things. That even brings up something in our society about privilege. What people think that, certain people believe that they're privileged to do things despite the horror, despite, being warned. They decide, somebody who she saw herself as, even though she was in danger, I'm above that.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was a great story about privilege. Actually, watching it this time around, it really resonated to me that way. Because even when she goes into that bathroom to take pictures, and she gets kind of jumped by that guy that's not the Candyman. But even then, when she's trying to reason with them, she really thought she was going to talk her way out of that. And I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Because if I myself got surrounded by those guys, I'm like, oh, well, there's no way I can just give them she tried to scold them and she just really didn't think anything was going to happen to her. Throughout the whole film, I felt like that. She felt that nothing was going to happen to her. because the amount of time she just crossed the line, I'm like, oh, you just came from such a position of privilege where you wouldn't think anything's going to happen to you. Meanwhile, her friend always thought something was going to happen to her. Like, she's like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be going there. Gangs run this area. Don't do this. And yeah, I thought it was
and that is definitely the view on what it's like being a person of color. You know, being a person of color, it's like we always have to think, okay, if I do this, what's going to happen? If I do this, what's going to happen? If I do that, there's always, you know, as a person of color, there's punishments for being brown in certain places, or being yellow in certain places, or being red in certain places. There are punishments for being of color in the wrong places, or taking too much privilege, or doing, you know, or going to the wrong place after dark, or we always have to be aware. And the nature of that friendship between the two women in that, it directly shows you what it's like in America, because one woman had to be like, oh, we shouldn't do this. Oh my God, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And it wasn't that she was just trying to rain on the parade. It was like, no, bro, this is dangerous.
Yeah.
You know, and the person with privilege, which I think at the end she happened to be Candyman's granddaughter or something.
Well, there was a connection that she was kind of in the crowd of when Candyman originally got captured. She was kind of there.
I thought she was like his great granddaughter, because they killed him because he got a white woman pregnant.
Yes. Oh yeah. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah.
No worries. I know way too much about horror.
Yeah.
But yeah, the white woman ends up being Candyman's granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that even in itself brings up a lot of there's a lot of politics in that.
Absolutely.
You know, not only is CM the perfect villain, it has an amazing social, political, and economic background. You know, there's very few horror movies that talk about racism.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few movies that aren't 12 Years a Slave that talks about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're just now getting those films, but at the time when that movie came out, nobody was talking about it like that.
No, not at all.
You know, we had Roots. That's what we had.
Yeah.
And that's what we had.